movie opens on an eclipse night in 1957 with a priest entering a church with a newborn baby. It turns out he wants to kill the baby, whom he calls the Seed of Evil, aka Donald Trump's jism. We then notice that the baby has a scar on the left side of its chest. After praying, the priest grabs a knife and tries to plunge it through the little one's heart. But just then, he is interrupted by the cops, who order him to drop the weapon. The priest begs them, saying he must do this to keep evil from spreading around the world. When he refuses to stop, the cops open fire and unalive him. The scene then shifts to 30 years earlier, in 1987, where a priest named Merrick arrives at an eerie-looking church called Sanatorium. It is revealed that those considered to be possessed by the devil are sent to this facility for treatment. Inside the church, Merrick is welcomed by the head priest, who is known as Prior. He appreciates Merrick's willingness to come, explaining that they have struggled to find people to help with their exorcism process. After this, Merrick is introduced to another priest, Dawid, who greets him and begins inspecting his belongings. Dawid finds cigarettes in his suitcase and confiscates them, as they are prohibited inside the sanatorium, and he wants a puff. The prior then leads Merrick to his quarters, explaining that there is no electricity or phones in this place. He expresses hope that Merrick will be comfortable during his stay, and then leaves him alone. In his room, Merrick changes his clothes, and we notice a scar on his chest, similar to the infant from 30 years ago. He then opens a hidden compartment in his suitcase, revealing a pistol, a flashlight, and other items prohibited in the area. He also takes out a newspaper that covers the cases of 8 missing girls. It turns out that Merrick is not a priest, but a police officer who is looking for information related to the missing women who were sent here, claiming to be possessed. In the next scene, Merrick arrives at the main hall of the sanatorium, where all the priests gather to eat. He is served meat that has an odd taste and smell. He notices that the other priests are eating it just fine, so he somehow finishes it so as not to arouse any suspicion. Later, while heading to his room, he notices the prior's assistant, Piotr, consoling a distressed blonde girl. The following day, Merrick is summoned to attend an exorcism of a woman at the facility. Upon entering the room, he realizes that this is the same blonde woman from last night. She is bound to a bed, and the prior is chanting prayers that make her scream. Piotr is also present in the room, recording the entire session. "Do not worry, it is for our only chance account." Shortly after, the bed starts moving violently, and a gust of wind blows through the room. The woman screeches loudly, and the cross the prior is holding catches fire. After the exorcism, Merrick feels uneasy and goes to the bathroom to refresh himself. Moments later, the mirror shatters on its own, which startles him when he discovers a huge crack behind the mirror. He curiously leaves his quarters and walks across the hallway. He soon arrives in front of a mysterious room and proceeds to enter, but Dawid interrupts him. The man claims that this is the prior's room, and no one is permitted to enter without his invitation. Hearing this, Merrick apologizes and walks away from there. He later sits down for dinner and is served the same strange meat. Merrick is so disgusted by its taste that he rushes to his room and begins vomiting. He also feels pain in his jaw and soon pulls out one of his teeth. To his shock, an insect comes out of his tooth and casually flies away. Later that night, Merrick manages to break into the prior's office and searches for clues related to the case. He notices a crack in the wall, which leads to a secret room where all the exorcism tapes are meticulously organized. Upon watching the videos, he quickly figures out that the exorcisms were completely staged. There are devices to make the bed move, a fan to create gusts of wind, and a lighter hidden behind the cross to start a fire. It becomes clear that the exorcisms are a scam, but he worries about what happens to the girls afterward. When Merrick returns to his room, he removes the crucifix from the wall and hides it in a cabinet. The next morning, the prior summons the priests for a prayer meeting and requests Merrick to lead the session. The latter hesitantly steps up and begins reciting the words, but the prior urges him to speak in Latin. Merrick tries his best, but it becomes evident that he doesn't know Latin well. Seeing this, the prior eventually stops him and asks Piotr to lead the prayer instead. I don't know what that was, I'm sorry. Upon returning to his room, Merrick discovers the crucifix hung back on his wall, which terrifies him. What do they have, maids? He believes the priests are keeping an eye on him and decides to leave. He grabs his gun and burns the newspaper related to the missing girls. He then proceeds to the exit door, only to discover it chained shut. Merrick uses all of his strength, but is unable to force it open. Moments later, he notices the other priests digging out a grave and placing a coffin. He then goes to the blonde girl's room, only to find it empty. Merrick realizes that she has been killed, but doesn't understand understand why. At this moment, Piotr approaches him and invites him to the confessional room. Marek obliges and heads there, where they talk in secret. Piotr reveals that the church is closely watching his every move because they suspect that he has ulterior motives. He explains that there is only one way to this place, and those who try to escape face harsh punishment. Marek also confides in Piotr and reveals his true identity as a police officer. He discloses that the exorcisms are staged, but Piotr confirms he is already aware. He states that the girls are drugged, causing them to scream as if possessed. We give them a bunch of ecstasy and then channel Harry Styles' newest album through earbuds for them. However, he is unsure what happens to them afterward. After their conversation, Marek returns to his room and begins searching for any spying devices. When he moves the wardrobe aside, he discovers a hole behind it surrounded by wet cement. Marek reaches into the hole and finds a strange object made of bones with a moving eyeball. This disgusts him so much that he starts vomiting a black liquid. Within the liquid, he notices several flies buzzing. He then turns away and hallucinates his own face covered in the black liquid. Terrified, Marek rushes outside and digs up the blonde woman's coffin, only to find it empty. Before he can process this shocking discovery, Dawood suddenly covers his face and knocks him unconscious. In the next scene, Marek wakes up tied to a bed, with the prior and Dawood standing before him. The prior informs him that they are already aware of his identity and have been keeping an eye on him. They then bring out 4 portions of strange meat and ask Marek to eat it all. When he refuses, Dawood punches him in the face, while the prior begins to forcefully feed him. This causes the poor guy to become sick and fall unconscious once again. Later that night, Marek wakes up and notices Dawood sleeping on a nearby chair. He seizes the opportunity to untie himself, but before he can escape, Dawood awakens. A struggle ensues between the two men, and Marek eventually manages to shoot Dawood dead. He then rushes to the kitchen to investigate what he's been eating. As he opens the freezer door, he is horrified to see the dismembered bodies of many women hanging from hooks. It finally dawns on him that he has been fed the meat of the women he has been trying to find. And women meat has flies in it, I guess. Just then, he's approached by Piotr, who asks him to follow him to the library. Upon arriving there, Piotr opens an ancient book and explains about the Chosen One. According to the book, the Chosen One was born during an eclipse and must be killed with a dagger soon after birth. If he survives, he will devour 7 sinners and drink the blood of an innocent. After doing this person will transform into a demon and establish a new world order. Piotr reveals that the church considers Marek to be the Chosen One because he was born with a scar on the eclipse night. It is revealed that the sanatorium worships the devil and intends to complete this ritual. While flipping through the pages, Marek is startled to find the same symbol as his own scar. Despite this, he refuses to believe the story and claims that he is just a simple police officer. He then expresses his desire to leave, so Piotr asks him to follow him into a secret passage through which they can escape. But just as they're about to depart, Marek hears a noise from behind. He soon finds himself surrounded by priests who immediately attack him and take him away. It turns out that Piotr was never on his side. What? And it was all a lie to win his trust. Never trust a man whose name rhymes with Gyotr. In the next scene, Marek is tied down and surrounded by priests dressed in red gowns. The prior explains that Marek's arrival here was no coincidence. It was they who sent him anonymous tips regarding the missing girls. He reveals that they are members of a brotherhood who believe that God and evil coexist with mutual understanding. They do not believe that the devil is evil. Rather, they regard humans as evils who deserve punishment. They have waited 800 years for his birth, and the church is designed around a well that serves as a portal to hell. Once the ritual is complete, the devil will emerge from the well and take over the body of the Chosen One. Following this, the priests begin their preparations to summon the devil. Marek has already consumed the flesh of the 7 sinners and the 7 meals he has eaten. He still needs to drink the blood of an innocent, so the prior brings a virgin girl before everyone. Marek panics and shouts at them not to hurt the girl. However, a priest mercilessly cuts her throat and everyone starts drinking her blood. You all all need to drink for the ritual? No, we just have weird kinks. Merrick refuses to partake, but the prior tortures him and forces him to drink. After all the rituals are completed, the prior tries to summon the devil multiple times, but nothing happens. They have followed everything the book has instructed them to do, but it still does not work. They should have known better when they ordered it from Instagram. Realizing that their ritual has failed, the prior sends the priests to their quarters. Before leaving, Piotr takes a dagger and thrusts it into Merrick's body while apologizing to him. He then instructs the others to throw Merrick's body into the well, which is supposed to be a portal to hell. Later, we see the prior in his room, deeply disappointed by the failure of his ritual. He then begins to drink heavily to drown his sorrows. Sometime later, Piotr arrives and tucks him into bed. The prior tells him that he is a good subordinate and apologizes for how the events turned out. But to his shock, Piotr grabs a pillow and suffocates his mentor to death, blaming him for all the mess. The next morning, the priests gather and burn the dismembered bodies of the women to erase evidence of their crimes. At this moment, Piotr informs them about the death of their leader. He pretends to be devastated and breaks into tears. Now that the head priest has died, Piotr takes over the position by default. In the meantime, Merrick awakens in the well with flies buzzing around his nose. As he looks on all sides, he realizes he is surrounded by bones. Suddenly, he senses something seizing control of him. His body then starts burning, causing him to scream in agony. In the final scene, Piotr is conducting a morning service when he suddenly becomes speechless and begins to choke. Then he levitates and his skull ruptures, releasing thousands of flies from his body. Shortly after, a demon known as the Sabbatic Goat appears in the church. Terrified, the priests try to run away, but they're frozen. All of the people in the church are suspended in the air upside down. The statue of Jesus slowly turns to face the demon, who returns the gaze and imitates the crucifix pose. He says. Somehow, the invocation of the devil has worked, but with unforeseen consequences. The dead flowers begin to bloom again, implying that the dead are resurrected while the living may eventually die. Well, they'll be resurrected after that, though, right? With a thunderstorm, the sky opens up and the earth transforms into a hellhole, bringing the movie to an end.